So, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where in the world you're joining us from today. And welcome to our webinar hosted by Provision Analytics, How to Scale FSMA Solutions in Fresh Produce Supply Chains. My name's Amy. I'm the Food Safety Content Manager at Provision. I'll be facilitating today's session and providing support to our speakers. Today, we're joined by not only Provision's own Kevin Davies, but also Lucy Angarita of GS1 and Fritz Klulo of Kezzler. And together, we're going to aim to show you guys all a number of tools that can help address the looming prospect of FSMA 204. But just before we get started, I want to go over some housekeeping notes briefly. To ensure enough bandwidth for our presenters and to keep things running smoothly, all of our attendees will be on mute throughout the session. However, we absolutely encourage you to type any questions that you may have for any of us throughout the presentations and discussion into the chat feature on the right-hand side of your screen. You can do this at any time throughout the presentation. You don't have to wait until the very end. And we'll address as many questions as we have time for at the conclusion of the session. We'll also be launching a few polling questions for you all to participate in throughout the webinar. And let me just get things started by sending that first one out to you now. If you'll just bear with me. All right, so just choose whichever of the options is the most accurate to your feelings. It's not a graded test. That first question is, what's your biggest challenge with FSMA compliance? This poll will be available throughout the webinar, so just pop your answer in whenever you have the chance. All the responses are confidential, and it's just meant to give us some extra insight into how we can build future content to best help our attendees. So, everyone's favorite four-letter word in food safety, FSMA, or, it's an acronym, close enough, right? Everybody's probably heard it 1,000 times, so I won't get too repetitive, but the long and short of it is that the list of affected commodities is very clear, and companies handling those commodities need to be capturing a certain list of records with specific data inside of them. This can sound overwhelmingly complex, especially at a large scale, but the only real challenge is making this work smoothly across grower packer distributor networks. So if you picture one distributor handling fresh produce from, say, 800 growers, how do they ensure that product IDs are unique and multiple products don't use the same Julian date? How does that distributor then get the data from those 800 growers into one spot in the first place? Those are the kinds of questions we're going to be unpacking today. And let's just jump right into it. I'm very happy to invite on stage Lucy Angarita of GS1. She's their Director of Community Engagement. Lucy, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much, Amy. It is an honor to be here, and thank you all for joining.
Awesome. Now, for those of us who might not be familiar, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and GS1?
Yes, of course. So, I am Director of Community Engagement, as you said, and what I do is I work with retail, grocery, food service, and now even other industries to collaborate and just point out common challenges the industry has in order to reach full supply chain visibility and traceability. And I've been here for the last 3 years. Before that, I was actually implementing traceability for the Subway system, the fast food Subway chain. And, standards are near and dear to my heart for many, many years. And then
Fantastic.
one,
Well,
I'll be talking
well,
to you about it in a minute.
oh, awesome. Well, without further ado, please go ahead, take it away whenever you're ready.
Wonderful. So before I get into the topic, I do have to take us through our antitrust, which is GS1 US is committed to fully complying with antitrust laws. And this means we don't discuss prices, margins, or any other competitively sensitive topic. And you can see the link there if we share the deck to get more details. And then the other thing we're asked to always call out is that we are not employees or representatives of the FDA. So all this content you're going to see has not been approved or reviewed by the FDA. And now to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing with our food industry members in order to help them meet FSMA 204 requirements. I don't know if we can do a show of hands here in the platform, but you could even raise your hand there where you are if you have read the 597 pages of the FSMA 204 rule and you know exactly what to do, which systems need to be involved, what processes need to be tweaked, etc. Well, our members actually, since the proposed rule was published in 2020, came to us saying, what do we do? How do we prepare? This included retailers, operators, manufacturers, distributors, solution providers, associations. Everybody wanted to get prepared and have enough time because people knew it was going to take time. So what we did was we created a work group to get people to collaborate, to talk, to understand each other's challenges from the different supply chain perspectives. And actually today we have about 96 companies represented in this work group with 215 plus participants. And the initial goal was to create actionable guideline to help companies implement traceability programs specifically for FSMA 204. And when we read the rule and we started understanding how it impacted each of the companies, we realized that, well, first it was a bit overwhelming, of course, because it was a lot, right? But then we when we started thinking about it, a lot of this data and a lot of the way people shared this data was already in place, specifically using GS1 standards. For example, most companies today have GTINs, global trade item numbers, to identify their products. A lot of people are familiar with EDI, advanced ship notices. So we started looking at, what everybody used and how they could leverage that gap between their business realities and that FSMA 204 requirement. And the key takeaway there was, regardless if you're going to design a solution in-house or if you're going to get a third party to help you with it, if you're talking the same language, if you're that will make you interoperable. It will help you communicate with your trading partners because, as Amy said, this is something you depend on your trading partners to work with you on. You cannot do it in a silo. So this is exactly what GS1 does. We actually bring companies together to speak a common language to move their business forward. And here's a great example. How many of you have been to Europe? They're trying to blow dry your hair, and all of a sudden the plug doesn't fit the outlet, right? That happens. And in reality, our businesses sometimes or many times run into this. I have my unique system and you need to interpret what my internal number is and you need to map it, etc. So that's actually something that we solve for by using common and unique identifiers and ways that you can share this information and everybody can understand. And to give you few more facts about GS1 US, actually we're used more than Google, believe it or not, because we have about 10 billion barcodes scanned daily. Every time you go to the grocery store, you scan, that's a GS1 licensed number. So we're known for the barcode, and we have about 116 member organizations worldwide. But what we really do is, in a non-competitive environment, get people to talk about solutions. How can you move your business forward? What are your challenges? And people find that they're very common. Even if you're talking to your competitors, you can work together to solve them. So now going back to how we have helped our members meet FSMA 204 requirements. Now, many of you, I believe, are very familiar with this graphic, right? This supply chain example from the FDA. Some of us have even dreamt about it, maybe. So many of us do these activities in our day to day business. I mean, we don't always capture and share the same information the same way. And the FDA recognized we needed a standardized framework for this. Because every time they received all this data to, for example, do a foodborne illness investigation, they realized, wow, we can't map this. We can't relate what's related, what records are related from the manufacturer to the distributor all the way to the food outlet. And this is what they wanted to do. And this is why they actually adopted this CTE KDE framework. Now, great news is this is not new. This language has been in the food industry since 2006, actually, when the Institute of Food Service Technologies, GS1, PTI, a lot of people got together to define this terminology to reach traceability. So KDEs and CTEs have been a standard way of capturing information, and GS1 standards has established this globally for some time. And this is kind of what we set out to do with our members as far as FSMA 204 is concerned. What have people been using? and how can we adopt this to meet the standard. So when we actually started our work group, we started prioritizing supply chain examples. We started looking at who's involved, what are the products, who's impacted, who's not impacted. And we prioritized with four very representative supply chain examples. So we have whole produce turning into a salad here, but this could be cheese, right? Or it could be whatever your product is in the supply chain could be plugged into one of these examples that we have published. And what we did was we started identifying the parties, for example, and those are the peach bubbles at the top. Who is responsible to collect this information at which steps? The icons at the bottom of this diagram are the locations or the different physical locations where the product goes through. And then the gray bubbles are the FSMA specific required critical tracking events that happen in each of the steps. Now, our guideline has for each of those bubbles a whole description of what happens, what kind of data is collected, who shares the data to who, etc. We published this first guideline in March of 2023, and we're getting ready now to publish the second version because as companies learn more and they're starting to implement these programs and doing pilots and all this stuff, they do want to add things or modify things. So it's a living and breathing document. Now, as far as the CTEs and KDEs framework, one of the things that was a little bit overwhelming was seeing 7 steps, right? 7 CTEs. Each of those had so many key data elements or, requirements that had to be collected. And in the case of, for example, shipping, you had to share it with your trading partners and you couldn't reassign a lot code. You had to use the one that was, assigned when the product is initially packed. So all of this was, resounding in our members' minds. And what we did to simplify things was we categorized all those KDEs into 3 buckets. Product information. So when people started looking at it, oh, this actually lives in our master data systems. Location information, which a lot of it also lived in their master data systems. And then transactional and event data. So that answers more to, where the product is coming from, where it's going, where it was transformed, the ingredients that went in there, what it became. All of this can also be solved using specific standard language. And this is how our first version of the guideline was created. So we published it, and it's 62 pages. But the good thing is that it's all laid out for you. It's best practice, and it's just a product of the collaboration that happened between all industry stakeholders. So this is not just like one party writing something for industry. It's industry speaking to industry. And what we did was we defined each data requirement and mapped it to an existing standard that people were familiar with and has been established for many years. So this way, companies can understand and plan what they need to do in order to make sure the information flows from one location to the next, from one partner to the next. But not only that, it also helps people be efficient, be scalable, and highly accurate by using the standards. Now, this is kind of how we explained the way the standards plug in to FSMA 204. And, it all starts with unique identification. If you see it at the top, you can actually license a company prefix is that number. And it's like a social security. It identifies your company, but with that prefix, you can actually assign global trade item numbers to products. You can assign global location numbers to the different physical locations, warehouses, distribution centers, etc. So you don't have to worry about mapping addresses, which is a pain. And then also pallets. You can assign serial shipping container codes, which are the numbers that identify a unique logistic unit. Now, then we go back to the capture side. There's data carriers like barcodes, like RFID tags, and these can be used to include specific information about the product. For example, the lot code. So we said the GTIN, global trade item number, plus the lot is what identifies the product and the traceability lot code, which is a requirement for FSMA. And as the product moves, this information can be captured. It doesn't have to be manually typed, which creates errors. And then the share standards. The shared standards is that master data that we're talking about can be shared from one source of truth. Everybody would know when changes happen through the Global Data Synchronization Network, or GDSN. And then there's also tools like Data Hub Location that help you if you don't have that master data system, or if you have it, you can go and access from your trading partners that product or that location information. And lastly, the EDI and EPCIS. These are transactional and event uh, data, and being able to share it in a standardized way, such as when you send an ASN for shipping, or you're transforming a product, creating the salad. This is EPCIS, which means Electronic Product Code Information Services. So we outline all of this in our guideline, and we say for this FSMA requirement, this is what you need to do to apply the standards. Now, I'm not going to go into detail in this, but I do want to get a little bit into how do we start? Because there's a lot of these questions going on now. We're in 2024 and we have 2 years to comply. And the first thing is make sure you have internal stakeholders aligned. Leadership is understanding what is needed from the different teams. It's not just the food safety teams, it's not just the IT teams. Everybody needs to work together to help this happen. Make sure you're having conversations with your trading partners. Make sure you understand what your traceability plan needs to be. Also, there's really good resources from the FDA. It's published, and we're including the link there as well, that you can go to and get very familiar with what the rule is actually requiring and what it's not requiring. And we also have resources out there. We have a 9-minute video showing you, giving you like a whole walkthrough for our guideline. We have a checklist. It's a 2-page checklist that takes you step by step what you need to do. And also we have case studies. So all of this you can find in our food safety website. And one of the things also before I leave, I want to point out is there are a lot of benefits beyond regulation. This is our supply chain visibility wheel. And from that same data that you use for traceability, you can get to improved inventory management. You can get to sustainability. And there is actually tangible ROI, for more accurate information, for less product waste, greater efficiencies, that you can have when automating, and, that brand loyalty and that customer trust that everybody looks for. So I actually included some case studies here, and you can read the full case studies on the links that we provided. But it tells you a little bit about how, companies that have implemented traceability have not only gained ROI with just cleaning up their product information. For example, here, Subway gained about $1.3 million of cost avoidance a year just by cleaning up product information before the traceability program. This was truckload optimization. But then after they had it in place, they quantified how much one recall they could save because they knew exactly where the targeted restaurants were, and they didn't have to go to all the locations. And then years later, they actually implemented an automated inventory management system that helped them save about the initial calculation was about $70 million a year, because instead of them doing manual inventory, they could do it really quick on an application because they had that foundation of GTINs, of GS1128 barcodes, of accurate product information. And that enabled so much more. So you're going to see a lot of other case studies when you visit that. You can always go to GS1 US, and there's many companies that have done that. And of course, you can always reach out to us for more information. And with that, I will hand it over to Amy.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lucy. I don't know how I didn't recognize that GS1 is even bigger than Google, but that makes total sense with the kind of scope and scale that you guys are working with every day. It's incredible. So we do have a couple more polling questions for the audience at this point. So we're going to go ahead and put those up on the screen for you all to review and respond to. We really appreciate your participation, but I'm While you guys are looking at all of those polls, I'm very pleased to introduce to the stage my colleague at Provision, Kevin Davies. After he spent time working with operations that process 2 million pounds of food a month, Kevin moved over to Provision and is currently the CMO here at Provision Analytics. He joined the Provision team in 2020 and has helped shape the software and bring it to market. For those who are unfamiliar with Provision and our mission, we focus on helping grower packers capture compliant data more easily, and the software can be set up to capture and manage any kind of auditable documentation. This could be anything from a daily pre-op checklist to sanitation records and pest control policies. Provision today is being used by hundreds of fresh produce operations to streamline food safety, regulatory, and supplier compliance. So Kevin, familiar face to me, maybe not to our audience, but welcome to the webinar and thanks for joining us. I'll let you jump right in since I know you have a live demo plan to show off some of our capabilities when it comes to FSMA compliance.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. So in this segment, we're going to be showing what it looks like to implement GS1 standards or any other kind of identification in order to actually capture data for the critical tracking events that are required by the FDA. Before I jump into it, just a little bit of background. I have dealt with compliance information for years. Prior to joining Provision, my company processed about 2 million pounds of food waste every month for major corporate clients like Starbucks. And we operated nationwide. So in order for us to achieve compliance, we had to pass a variety of regulatory standards. We were producing a certified organic product and had multi-year record retention for that. We had safety compliance. We were a B Corp. So we had all kinds of paperwork, and it was truly just done on paper. And it got to such a bad point with the amount of record keeping that we were doing. We were handling about 3,000 records a month. And in our compliance room, we had racks and racks of binders that we had to store over the years. And we ended up with so many binders that we had to keep hold of that we actually had to move the desk out of our compliance room so that we could fit more binders on the shelf. So the thing that really bothered me as the person leading the business is that the record keeping we were doing to achieve compliance at the time with that business, it wasn't actually making us a better company. And the binders were, to me, kind of like a physical manifestation of all of the time that we had lost actually doing this. So I never got to solve the problem while I was at that company. We stayed on paper. And the reason that we had to stay was that I was unable at the time to find software that was really designed to be easy enough for operators. The challenges that I faced in that business were that we had ESL staff who had never really handled software before, and they needed to capture really sensitive information. We also had really quick turnover of that staff. And so we didn't really have the ability to do extensive training for a platform. We really needed something lightweight that they could pick up and kind of move with without issue. And I found that, a lot of software companies were over-engineering their solutions, and they were tooled more for, Silicon Valley than Salinas Valley. At Provision, we've really focused on flipping the script by creating a really nimble software that companies can use, not only for their FSMA compliance, but for all of their compliance for food safety certifications, for customer audits, and for regulations. So Provision is an entirely customizable tool that can take all of your record keeping and all of your policies and procedures, bring it into the cloud so that you're able to use basically guardrails while you work in real time, capturing this data, ensuring that you're audit ready anytime. I'm going to jump into a demo and show you what it looks like to use the software. And I'll just share my screen. Okay, perfect. So keep in mind as I do this demo that because Provision is totally customizable, what we take a look at now is just an example of how it can be set up for FSMA 204. It's by no means a requirement. So we're just going to take a quick look at how some of these records look today and how you can kind of address the challenges of digitizing a fresh produce operation where you probably face similar operator constraints to what I faced in my prior business. So jumping into it, the thing that will be consistent in your use of provision with what we take a look at in this demo is the core modules you see on the left-hand side of your screen. Forms is the area of provision where you can basically capture documentation. So this is where your records will live for your critical tracking events. So if you're looking for a way to complete harvest records, cooling records, packing records, shipping records, all of those are forms that will live in this area of provision. Tasks is the module that lets you schedule and track that activity and ensure that it's done on time. And reports is the module that lets you summarize, search, and analyze that activity. So reports at the end of the day is where you can get a one-click download of a sortable spreadsheet, which appears to be the FDA's preferred way of receiving this info. So taking a look at this from a distributor perspective, let's say that we're operating a commercial brand producing fresh produce that we ship to retail. What I would want to make sure as the brand is that none of my growers or my suppliers have actually missed any of the required record keeping. So what you're able to do in provision is ensure that there are tasks that are built out that will streamline their activity. And the beauty of these tasks is that it will automate any kind of reminders and chasing so that you don't need to have compliance managers who are doing that manually themselves. So if you want to make sure that every shipment you receive has previously had its packing record, its cooling record, and its original harvest already filled out, that sequence of events can be automated for you using one of these tasks. So that will power the notifications that we see here. These exist both in the app and in email. And the nice thing is that if any of these tasks are missed, it will automatically move into an overdue status. You're able to see which organization is late on these tasks. You can even drill it down to which employee or team missed these tasks. So this gives you kind of the quick management insight that you would need to actually oversee a network's compliance. And all of this can flow into dashboards for you if you actually want to have your supplier compliance charted for you to ensure that all of your growers and packers are actually filling out these records when they're needed in a way that's compliant. So jumping into these records, it's dead simple for a grower or packer to jump from a task into the corresponding record keeping. It's just one tap. And these records in provision are really built so that you can help your operators to work in dead simple, drop-down menu, plain text selections, but for all of that to hook up to more rigorous structured data in the background. Basically, you want to make sure that you have, a GS1 standard or, something equivalent for serialization, but you want to make sure that you're not actually wasting time for your operators, having them, type in or handwrite, really structured, complicated data that's difficult for their training. So inside of provision, a lot of the way that your critical tracking events can be set up is to allow you to arrive at your KDEs as quick as possible. We're only happy if this is working about half the time of paper to actually land on a completed record. So when somebody jumps into, say, this harvest record, it's really quick for them to blast through. Let's say they're harvesting tomatoes, and these are tomatoes on the vine. I wanted you to keep your eye down here on the GTIN identification. As soon as I identify the pack style that I'm putting this in, let's say I'm packing a loose initial harvest of these tomatoes, it can combine all of this plain information that an operator will intuitively understand, and it can use that to automatically pull forward a GTIN identification if you choose to implement a GS1 standard. There's any number of lot IDs that can actually be produced in provision. This is just one example, but it's a good example for the reasons that GS1 called out of having the assurance that you actually have unique IDs across a network. We can do the same thing for global location numbers. So for a grower, if they're just saying that they're in field A, block 1, row 1, this is something that might be intuitive for them to understand, but it can automatically pull forward their GLN. So in just a matter of seconds, we have a completed record here. And the nice thing is, if you have, say, Spanish-speaking staff, provision is built to hook into live translation. So you can work in any of 109 supported languages, capture data in whatever way is simplest for your operators, but unify their information with the identification numbers that are really critical in this record. and in just one tap, you can snap it back to English. So really quick and nimble for you to actually coordinate, say, a harvest crew with, a packer downstream, even if they're speaking different languages. So it's as simple as that to complete an initial harvest record, but that's just the start of our trace sequence. What I'm going to do next is open up a new form that adds new blocks onto that sequence. So if we go into a packing record, what Provision can do is it can autofill a lot of the record keeping for you so that you're moving faster. So when we start our packing record, all we have to do is, pick the product that we had previously harvested, and it will automatically pull forward all the prior harvest information into our pack record. So all we have to do for the packing record is pop in the additional key data elements that are required by the FDA. So again, we can select a location in plain English that can pull forward the GLN. We can put a new pack style in. Let's say that we're now packing clamshells. That can again pull in the GTIN. And we now have a pack of 12 units that's associated with this harvest of 192 units. And the great thing is that as soon as we save this packing record, it will automatically put those events together in a related sequence. So I can see here that my packing record is related to the prior harvest, and we can continue to add events into that sequence. So if we now put these into cooling, if we then ship them, it's going to continue to stack up that traceability history. And these records are only taking a couple seconds at a time. They're very light touch for us to actually put that together because the system is doing the heavy lifting in the background. So again, when we move all the way forward to a shipping event, we just pick the item that we just packed, and it will automatically pull forward not only the harvest, but now the packing information as well. So we can put in, our origin location for our shipment, again, pulling forward the GLNs so that we have unique identification. We can give this a pack style. Let's say that this is a tray of clamshells. It can automate the GTINs, the pack size. And once we say, where we're shipping this to, let's pretend it's a certain Costco store, we have our end destination. So when I save this shipping record, it's just another event in that traceable sequence. So we can see the whole sequence related together here. I could jump from the shipment back to the pack. I could jump from the shipment back to the original harvest. And all of that is, nicely unified data. So when we go to submit this for review, all of it goes into a single report. So what the FDA has asked for at the end of the day is that they have a sortable spreadsheet of all of your trace data. It's really quick to select all of the KDEs that you want to pull in for the FDA. So let's say that we want to include, something like the end destination. We can just save that as something that goes into our final report. We can now see our customer address. So very easy to customize the contents of this summary report. And it's just one click to get the downloadable spreadsheet. If you want to search for any certain product that you want to do a trace back on, it's really quick for you to do a search based on any of the data that you've captured in the past. So let's say that you wanted to do, global location number of 080479976 as an example. You could live filter down to anything that has that GLN. I could just as well do a search by the GTIN or anything like that. And if you want to drill into any one of these shipping records, it's just one click to jump from the summary report into that CTE. And again, this is all tied together. So we could just as well jump back to the original harvest and immediately call forward any of the information that would be required for the trace. So this is how it looks to use Provision for critical tracking events. And the beauty of this is that it can be unified with any of the other compliance information you're already capturing. So as a grower, you can have one harmonized tool for everything, from your seed and spray through to any of these CTEs alongside any other information that's required for your food safety or supplier compliance. So that's it for Provision segment. I'll hand it back to Amy.
Thanks so much, Kevin. It's always so exciting to see just how flexible the platform is. I feel like every time I see you, Kevin, or one of our sales reps demo something for a client, I'm like, wow, this can really integrate into so many different use cases to cover operations of every scope and every scale. Now, last but certainly not least, I am very happy to bring on stage our final presenter for the day. Fred Clulo of Kezzler. He's the U.S. General Manager over there. Fritz, it's so great to have you on. Thanks for joining us on the webinar, and I'll let you take it away whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Amy. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right.
So, my hope for today is obviously just following the two great speakers that we just had, is to try to get us think a little bit differently about how we manage data at an enterprise level. First of all, a little bit about Kezzler. So really what we do is that we mobilize product data to power transparency at scale. What that really means is that we do not create data. We do not acquire data. Rather, what we do is that we plug into data streams emanating from data capture systems that you may have within the enterprise, such as provision analytics or perhaps an MES. And we reconcile those data streams into a cohesive whole so that it can be turned into operable data for the enterprise. And when needed, mobilize that data stream into different configurations to different systems that may need that data within the enterprise, or different supply chain partners that may need to plug into that data for their own purposes or to enhance your data as well. And I think that that's fairly germane to the FSMA 204 conversation. A lot of the conversation around FSMA 204 has been so far around what are the requirements and not so much really about the challenges at scale. And we've heard a little bit about some of the challenges that are occurring and how we solve that. We heard from Lucy about the importance of achieving interoperability. Excuse me. We just heard from Kevin about data acquisition at growers and how important that is, how we can actually resolve that challenge. And really what I want to bring to your attention here is once you have that data, once you have interoperability, how do you really manage that data at scale? And how do you solve some of the challenges that we see when you have multiple data points that need to be reconciled to be able to support your FSMA 204 compliance journey? The reason for that is that really there's three key challenges that we see. The first one is that we have what we call a high degree of data fragmentation across the supply chain. Very likely, you already have all the data somewhere that you need for FSMA 204. It probably lives in different systems. Some of it may be with provision, some of it may be within an MES, some of it may be within your WMS, and you just need to bring it all together. But the reality is easier said than done. For one reason is that there is, in many ways, a lack of standardization. That's why, looking at something like GS1, trying to get becoming PCIS compliant or on an EDI journey is so important, because that provides the universal language that in many ways allows you to bring data from external parties into your space, but also in many ways allows a layer to connect to all these different systems and allows those systems to transact in a universal language that everybody in all those different systems understand. The other point is that achieving that data stitching, again, is easier said than done. At scale, that can be fairly complex. You have to think about, how do I reconcile information I'm getting from a grower with all the data streams that are coming from different distribution centers, from different sites, from different systems, and marry that into a whole. They may be speaking different languages. Some may be EDI compliant, some may be PCIS compliant, some may be completely different. Some may have an Excel file. How do I bring all that into my house, my data space, in a way that is all in the same format, and then in a way that I can actually use it? What I want you to take away from this is that before we move on to the next point, is that there are three main challenges really that are about interoperability. So how do you make sure the different systems can talk to each other? Integrability, which is how do they really exchange that data at the core, not only between the systems, but also between different parties. And then also scalability, which is how do we handle all this data that is going to be coming from FSMA 204? And we're going to address that in a little bit more in a second. The way traditionally that this has been done is that companies are looking at ERPs. ERPs are great. They're a great business database. They're great for business purposes. But what has happened over the last decade and a half is that enterprises have looked at ERPs as a multi-tool to do everything. Every single time there's a new requirement that comes along or a new capacity that needs to be integrated into any enterprise IT ecosystem, automatically, oftentimes, they turn to the ERP. And that's akin to, a Swiss Army knife. Swiss Army knives are great. They're multi-tools. They can do many things. But if you're going to chop a carrot, I don't really think you're going to be using a Swiss Army knife. You're going to be using the right tool. You're going to take your chef's knife, and then you're going to use that tool for that. And then if you have to cut a piece of bread, then you're going to take the serrating knife, and you're going to use that tool for the piece of bread. That's one of the ways you want to think about the ERP. It's phenomenal for as a business database. It's phenomenal for business purposes. But the reality is, when it comes to traceability, they can fulfill a certain role, but can they really fulfill the extent of data traceability that is required by FSMA 204? One of the reasons that they're not perhaps best fit for that purpose, among many reasons, is that they lack the data structure to be able to acquire that traceability data and making that data available, let's say, in an efficient manner. I want you to take a step back and consider the amount of data points that the FDA is asking you to collect through FSMA 204. And I want you to think about it across number of SKUs and number of touch points that you have throughout your supply chain. Very quickly, you're going to realize that any request that the FDA is going to put out may actually involve multiple SKUs across multiple sites. And you need to provide that within a very short amount of time. Those data requests can scale up to thousands of data points. So are you really confident that your ERP can really provide you the data that you need within that specific time frame? The way that they're usually structured in terms of from a database perspective usually is not conducive to an ERP being able to provide you the data that you need within the interval of time that you're looking for. That being said, of course, you can say, well, I can perhaps expand my ERP to make sure that I capture more of the traceability data that I'm looking for. And that's another challenge, is if you may need to require different KDEs for different products, you may be looking at acquiring different data. Perhaps for some products, you may be looking at acquiring humidity data, temperature data. Do you really need to restructure your ERP and engage into a process of consulting and configuration and customization every single time that you need to make a change or that you bring a new SKU into the market? Right, that can get costly very quickly. It's also very convoluted, and obviously also decreases performance. So all of this really adds up to a tremendous challenge for ERPs to really be able to say, look, I have a lot of data from all my supply chain partners. How do I bring this into a database that really provides the support and the time that I need? And it's usually not really being done with an ERP. The way we think about this is from a connected product platform approach, which, just like an ERP, remains the single source of access. So you really want to try to achieve a solution that allows you to plug into the different points of your supply chain, the different systems that you may have, and provide you a single source of truth. Nowadays, if you were to do a traceability request, very likely you may need to go into perhaps every single MES that you have at different plants, or every single instance you may have at different growers. What you really need to have is a platform that allows you to bring all that in-house, regardless of the different systems that you have in the different points of your supply chain. And to do that within low latency and fast retrieval. You don't want to be waiting for hours, sometimes days, for your database to be able to spit out the FSMA report that you require. Rather, you want to make sure that you always have a certain amount of data that is always there, ready to go, and that you can query a lot number or an ID or a batch number, depending on what you're using, or a GTIN, and have that data readily available. Often what we hear is sub 2 hour report generation, sometimes even less. Sometimes the requests are immediate. And so there again, the question remains, is the database that you're using to provide traceability structure within a technical way that allows you to provide that data with minimal waiting time? And that goes back to the scalability and integration capabilities. Can the database that you're using easily plug into the different systems that you have? Do they leverage interoperable standards such as GS1? Are they EPCIS compliant? Can they do EDI? Can they accept the information that I have? So if it's in a CSV file, is there a way for me to take that data and allow the platform to translate that data and let the platform take care of that process? So rather than putting the onus on the floor operation, provide the means for the floor operator to provide that data, and for the platform that is a single source of access to translate that data and marry that data in a way that is cohesive and allows that data to be married to the rest of the information that you're accruing throughout the rest of the supply chain. The fourth point is metadata flexibility. As I alluded to before, obviously you may have different products depending on what food vertical you're in. They may require different KDEs. You may be looking at augmenting the data that you collect, enriching that data, as I said, with humidity and temperature information, pressure information, manufacturing information, so on and so forth. So how easy is it for that platform to provide what we term metadata flexibility? That is configuring different product profiles and having the ability to ingest any type of data, whatever data that might be. That may be weight, that may be temperature, that may be a G10. Can they take that data that will be usable for you without engaging into a complex exercise of configuration management? And the final point is really extensibility, is what other tools and what other modules and what other services can that platform provide? So let's say you have FSMA 204 nowadays, that's great. But what happens when there's a new requirement that hits the market? Do you, again, need to engage into a complex exercise of hiring a consultant to expand that data space and expand the new product profile, and all of a sudden engage into a whole new model that is bespoke to the ERP that you're trying to get? Or is it more of a turnkey solution that allows you to plug in both different modules and augment what you're already doing with additional services that may extend the value that you're getting out of FSMA 204? And so if we put all this together, if you think about this in a one-dimensional axis, right, and we try to represent what a value chain would look like, think that every single one of those buckets, perhaps, not all of them may apply to you. Some of them might, you may have more of you, but this is a very simplified view of what a supply chain would look like and the different KDEs that you may need to acquire. The idea is to be able to have a platform, or rather think about it as a layer more than a platform, that allows you to connect and collect the different data emanating from provision, data emanating from your supply chain partners, data emanating from different operations, intra operations that you may have, such as your DCs, production, manufacturing, packaging operations, and coalesce all that data that lives within different data silos into a unified whole. And within that unified whole is a whole interoperable. As you can see here, we do refer to an EPCIS event repository. So again, is it interoperable? Does it leverage standards so that you can take that data, and if tomorrow some of your supply chain partners ask for information, that platform is ready to provide that information in a language that they understand within a time frame acceptable. What I also want to bring to your attention is when we talk about FSMA 204, is that oftentimes we focus on the cost. We say, well, there's a regulation, I have to do this. But does your platform allow you to take all this great data that you have collected and turn that into a valuable revenue stream, brand value stream for you? One example I'm giving here, and of course, that's not required by FSMA. Imagine that you have all this information. Wouldn't it be neat if you could take this information and make that information available to the consumer? Right, so the consumer has a firsthand experience of how fresh the product is, how transparent and where it came from, how it's gone through the supply chain, because that at the end of the day enables you, and this is of course just one example, enables you to take all this data that you have taken here that come from different systems, you turn it into a cohesive stream of data that then can be presented to a consumer or can be transacted and sent to different parties across the supply chain, so that your FSMA 204 compliance is no longer a compliance cost, but allows you to take that information and really turn it into actionable intelligence that either allows you to have a complete picture of what's going on throughout your supply chain and turn that into a supply chain optimization process, or perhaps a consumer engagement process, or perhaps some other things that we're not thinking about right now. But the only way you can do that is if you have a platform that can really scale within the data complexity and the data volumes that you will be encountering with FSMA 204. But that journey, again, only begins once you begin to capture that information and implementing systems that allow you to capture that information, leveraging appropriate standards so that everybody can talk to everybody else. And then we can marry all that data and create a great product journey for the enterprise, for your partners, and for consumers. And I think that is all I have to say.
It's so complex. There's so much data moving around, and the goal is just to get it all into one place so it's all accessible for everyone at all times. And thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. All right. We want to get on to our Q&A while we still have some time here, but just to wrap things up from all of our presenters, just to rehash, so GS1 enables unique IDs for locations and products, which lets you all trace a product in a few taps without mixing histories or sources together. GS1 standards can be used within the records that are kept inside of Provision, and Provision allows data captured digitally for all the critical tracking events required by the FDA and FSMA 204. It's already a tool of choice for fresh produce compliance, and its flexibility allows capture of more things than just required data. And all of that data goes through and plugs into Kezzler. And Kezzler enables you to combine data from an entire network of suppliers into one central view and pulls data from systems like Provision while harmonizing histories and records so that downstream operators and distributors can trace product histories at scale, no matter how many suppliers have contributed along the way. All right, I've got one more polling question to launch for you all. And if you haven't gone back and responded to our earlier questions, now is the time to do so, because we're going to head into our discussion and audience Q&A. If you haven't sent your questions in for our presenters via the chat box on the right-hand side of the screen, please go ahead and do that now. As I said at the start, we'll address as many questions as we have time for in the time that remains in our allotted hour. So I'm going to invite all of our presenters back on stage while I launch this last polling question. And just to kick things off, Kevin, I know working together at Provision, I know we see a lot of people asking about how difficult it is to manage international suppliers. So could you tell our attendees a little bit about how Provision handles implementation and support internationally?
Yeah, certainly. We approach international supply chains through our partner network. So in addition to Provision being partnered with Kezzler, we're also partnered with expert groups like DNV, who have global staff networks. So DNV staff spans more than 100 countries and basically enables growers and packers to have boots on the ground assistance in how their software is implemented and how their software is supported. This can be a really big challenge with some operations, just to ensure that digital adoption is actually supported for groups who are totally new to it. And DNV allows that to be done in the time zone, in the language, and appropriate to the culture. So using their services can really help to make the software results even better.
Awesome. All right, we've got a question that's come in here. Please keep them coming. We'd love to answer as many as you can. We've got a question about GS1 for Lucy. This question is asking, our operation only handles a very small number of products. Would GS1 still be applicable?
Absolutely. There's models that can, depending on the number of products you have or number of locations, you can get a prefix for just that.
Awesome. So you don't have to be dealing with the Google size numbers, right?
Right. Absolutely. You definitely don't.
Awesome.
And you can grow your business as your products, number of products grow, you can have additional prefixes. So you can start small.
The scalability is great. All right, we've got a question here. Kevin and Fritz, could you talk a little bit about how the pricing works for Provision with Kezzler integration?
Yeah, there's two pieces of Provision pricing. There's a price for the implementation service. So we have a team of food safety and software experts who can take analog record templates and build them into Provision. After that, they can also train the staff. So this can be done by both Provision and by DNV. So that implementation has a one-time price, and following that, there's a software subscription that is typically billed monthly. And the pricing will vary depending on the size of the network. So if anybody has questions about our pricing, happy to follow up on that. There's a demo link available. And Fritz, you can take it away on your end with Kezzler's portion of things.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. The reason I'm looking to my left is I'm actually sitting next to Kevin, so we're playing a game of, I guess, switching microphones on and off. So yeah, I mean, very much as Kevin said, so it's very similar. Obviously, being a SaaS offering, we're based out of an annual license, and then from there, because we plug into different revenue streams, part of the scalability of that component is what different systems do we plug in. But as Kevin said, we are also partnered with DMV, and in many projects we partner with DMV and provision analytics. So of course everything is also available through DMV. It's all a question of understanding really what the complexity and what the program is. And I think we would like to pride ourselves in always sitting down with our customers to understand their needs, and from there take that conversation forward in a way that best suits what they're looking for and what their needs and requirements are, and from there the pricing.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, and feel free to click the link. There's one up now for requesting a demo through Kezzler if you're interested in more information. I would definitely encourage you all to check that out. All right, we've got a great question here. I think Lucy and Kevin, you're going to be teed up for this one here. This person's saying, we already have our item IDs and documentation built on a digital platform, but we don't like how things are going. However, we don't want to handle or deal with transferring them over to something new, or having to come up with new IDs from scratch. How would our situation be handled with GS1 and provision? Lucy, do you want to talk about the ID situation?
Yes. So I'm assuming they have their internal IDs.
Yeah, that's what it
And
sounds like. They already have existing IDs for their products.
so in that case, what we would suggest is to still get your prefix and assign the globally unique IDs, because your internal IDs, they might be repeated somewhere else. But if you get your company prefix, they would be unique to you. And you could just map it. If you want to keep using your internal IDs, you can just map the GTINs, the global trade item numbers, to those internal IDs to continue to be used in your legacy systems. However, when you share to trading partners outside, you could continue to use the GTINs for that purpose, and that way you can guarantee that people don't have to map, your internal IDs to their internal IDs, but everybody's using that global number that just guarantees a lot of clarity and accuracy.
Fantastic. And Kevin, how about if they've already got an extensive system built into another platform, what would you suggest in terms of moving over to provision?
Well, at Provision, the implementation service makes it easier to make that transition. You can provide documentation as it exists today, and that can be retooled to live in Provision. So our team can definitely streamline that. And because Provision is totally customizable, there can be minimal change management in ensuring that the contents of records might actually look identical between two different platforms. And the system does support that. I think that Fritz could actually add to this well. One of the things that we can do with Provision is allow customers to use their own identifications in the front end of the tool, but there can actually be unique serialization that's done in the back end when we plug into Kezzler. Fritz, do you want to add into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Kevin said, so I mean, we can generate our own identifications at the same time we can ingest other forms of identifications. Obviously, we're GS1 compliant, so we can also intake GTINs. You may find that you have different identification forms for different products at different levels. I mean, for instance, you may have, at the initial packer, perhaps you may be dealing with GTIN, whereas once you go down the supply chain, you may be looking at something like NSSEC, and you may want to track that SSEC. So from our side, we're also completely agnostic, so we can support external serialization, internal serialization. At the same time, if there is a trading partner of yours that is sharing information with you and they're identifying how they're identifying the products, we can also ingest that so that you are able to stitch together all those forms with the different identifiers.
Awesome. All right. I haven't seen any other questions coming through. I know we're just about out of time, so I think we'll wrap things up. Any parting words of wisdom from our presenters here? Kevin, anything you'd like to say before we wrap up?
My biggest recommendation is to keep things light for growers. I think that growers can drown in ERPs, and usually they need a quicker, more flexible way to capture information. So my recommendation is to hide complexity at the farm level, but to ensure that you have, a smart tool like Kezzler, smart standards like GS1 that can operate in the background, plugging into provision to ensure that, simple solutions at a grower level can really scale to sophisticated solutions at, a distributor level downstream.
We definitely want that data iceberg where you just see the little bit above the surface and that's all you have to deal with, right? All right, Fritz, any parting words for the audience before we wrap up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think FSMA 204 can be somewhat overwhelming, right? I'm not going to say that there's a lot of unknowns, but there's many ways in which you can comply with FSMA 204. So I would say is take a step back, do a real analysis of where you are, a general analysis of where you are and where you want to be, and take this opportunity of FSMA 204 as a journey towards digitizing that process, because I think that will really create a lot of value for different enterprises. The other component to this, I would say, please do look at the FSMA 204 document that has been created by the GS1 FSMA 204 work group. Hats out to Lucy, because she's been instrumental there. She's way too humble. So I'm just going to say, as a member of that work group, she's done a phenomenal job, and the entire GS1 community and all the contributors there have done a tremendous job in terms of helping people understand what is required and how to get them there. So if you haven't taken a look at it, go to GS1, take a look at that document, because I think it will really help you.
Fantastic. Any words from our rock star? A round of applause for Lucy. And any parting words for everyone, Lucy, before we end the webinar?
I just like this African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So take advantage what others have done, what we have done as an industry, and reach out if you have questions.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for joining us, audience and panelists both. We absolutely appreciate your time and your attention. So we will hopefully see you on a future webinar, and have a great rest of your week.